Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. In this episode, Diana Bikbaeva of Marashlian and Donahue, a boutique law firm focused on telecoms and startups, talks about her passion for AI law and the brave new world we find ourselves in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast, where we try to humanize the very normal people who are behind communications technology and cybersecurity. My name is Jason Walls from QA Cafe. I'm the host, and I am here with Diana Bikbaeva of Marashlian and Donahue Law Group. And they have kind of an interesting story of specifically reaching into our sector, into telecom and communications in general, and startups and how that stuff. So we're going to talk about all those cool things in a minute. As I've said before, Epik Mellon is entirely funded by my employers or QA Cafe, and so the views expressed by myself or Diana do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership, and the very, very same, I assume, goes for Diana.
Yes.
Even more so, right? And again, so because QA Cafe is funding this podcast, I like to talk a little bit about the products that bring QA Cafe to life and fund my salary and make it so that we can be here doing this show. The first is CD Router. CD Router is the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi routers, and other customer premises equipment. CD Router contains thousands of fully automated test cases designed by network experts who sit right out there in that room, covering feature validation, stability, certification, and performance all in one. Moreover, QA Cafe's world-class support team acts as an extension of your own, helping you understand the technologies and build better products overall. Secondly, CloudShark is the way to make network packet captures an easy and useful part of your cybersecurity workflows. CloudShark helps you work on tough issues together without passing around large trace files, losing data, or risking security leaks of valuable information, and helps entry-level analysts learn from your senior experts, curate best practices, and standardize operating procedures around packet captures, which is actually very rare that happens. And lastly, QA Cafe's Passport is a fully automated solution for testing the connectivity and interoperability of IoT and smart home devices. Testing with Passport is as simple as connecting your device, selecting tests, and getting clear pass-fail results with full log data and packet captures to find and resolve bugs before they end up as a bad review of your product on Amazon. To find more about CD Router, CloudShark, and Passport, visit us at www.qacafe.com. Sorry, I got distracted there for a brief second. I didn't see my volume thing going up on the microphone, and I freaked out for a second. I was like, oh no, it's not hearing me, and we didn't test it first.
Oh, that was fun. That was fun. Thank you so much for introducing your products.
Yeah, no, we're actually a pretty small company. I don't know. Actually, I don't think I've ever talked about this on the show, but there's only 17 of us. We're up in Dover, New Hampshire. Yeah.
That is kind of similar to us at Marashlian and Donahue. We're a very focused group of people working in telecom and tech law. So I get you.
Well, no. So what's interesting about that is it really is kind of a niche, right? For us, it's very niche because we're also talking about testing and then testing gateways specifically. But it's valuable to focus, right? And
yes.
so I think it's very cool that that's what you guys are doing. Like it makes me happy that there's somebody out there that is doing that.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the trend for for service providers to get more focused and for the clients to find exactly who they need and the types of services that they want. So it's a very good dynamic.
Right. No, that's cool. So you've been there how long?
I've been with the firm for about 6 months now.
Right. Right. So what is the story about deciding to sort of carve out that niche?
So for the firm or for myself? Okay.
Well, both.
Both. Okay. I can start. I can start with the firm. So the core team of the firm, the managing partner, Jonathan Marashlian, and the partners have been working in telecom for the most part for most of their careers. and they worked in big law firms and the practices that focused on telecom law, and they grew a wealth of experience, more than 20 years of experience in this niche area, and they decided to build their own firm, which carried their values that were maybe a little bit different from the big law values.
Okay, okay. I want to
So,
explore that a little bit, but finish what you're saying first.
sure. So it was a very, I, I really like this that they did this, because they grew this expertise, and they established good connections in the industry and understood what the businesses wanted, and they saw how they could increase the value proposition by
Hmm.
first of all delivering very high quality services, and secondly delivering them on the terms that are agreeable to the businesses.
Right, right.
And with a boutique law firm that is smaller, you have more flexibility to do that, and that is what makes us different from
Right.
big law firms,
No,
because
it's
we're
interesting because
flexible.
that's why we have the cafe in QA Cafe because it's always been a boutique software company, right? Where for exactly those same reasons, right? It
Yeah,
lets you be way more flexible.
and that's
Yeah,
awesome. And a lot of clients want that, and especially startups that are bootstrapping. They
yeah.
don't have a lot of funding at first, but they want to do things right.
Hmm.
So that's a good fit in this situation.
Cool, 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 cool. So how about you? How did you get into that specific niche?
So it all started with my interest in tech law.
Hmm.
I went to the University of Illinois College of Law, and precisely because I really liked their tech and IP law program. It is one of the
Hmm.
best ones in the area for sure, and potentially nationally. Um, and after that, I got a job with a law firm, also with a boutique law firm that mostly catered to tech startups coming out of the University of Illinois Business Incubator, and they were great. And um, we did corporate law and intellectual property law
Right,
there,
right, right.
and I got to learn the ropes, and I understood which problems tech startups may face and how they can prevent them.
Hmm.
And then through through a course of different meetings and like getting to know people, I got to know Marashlian and Donahue, the Com Law Group, our firm.
Hmm.
And it was actually thanks to my colleague who also went to the University of Illinois, and we met at the student alumni conference there, and we became friends. And a year or two later, he invited me to a webinar that he was doing, and I got really impressed with what he did and with what the firm was doing. So I
Right.
reached out to the managing partner, and we connected on LinkedIn and kind of forgot about it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then last year, actually around a year ago, when all the AI um, matters became really, really popular. And so
Hmm. Hmm.
the ChatGPT came out, um, lawsuits came out, lawsuits against some of the generative AI technology
Oh yeah,
and the
yeah.
way that it was trained on copyrighted data came out. And I got really interested in this because I've always liked copyright law, and I've always been interested in technology. So these two things kind of collided together, and
Cool,
I decided
cool.
to research this more. And I've heard that there were some arguments that potentially training AI on copyrighted data is fair use, and I was really
Right.
interested in exploring that because, um, as you might know, it is a very complex and flexible doctrine.
Hmm.
So I started doing research and writing about it, and that's how we connected again with a managing partner, and I got offered a job in June. So I've been with the firm for about 6 months now. I'm still fairly new to the telecom area of
Yeah.
law, but I'm really excited. And I think that this is a very cool area of technology because communication is probably the most important thing that we as humans have. And this is like good communication can make um, great relationships and
Right.
successful business relationships, and bad communication can make that not happen. So I
Oh,
feel
yes,
like
and it's entirely metaphorical in a lot of ways.
yeah. So fostering communication um, is like I really admire that telecom companies are doing this, and I admire the innovators in this area like Jeff Pulver and the Free World Dial-Up and others. So trying to make
But it's funny when you guys mentioned Jeff when we were talking about setting this up, because he's been around for a long time, and it like so long that back in the days of when trade shows were very different than they are now. And kind of these insanely huge affairs, and he would throw these huge parties, and
well, I was very lucky and honored to be to present at one conference
yep.
in the fall.
Hmm.
So it's a great environment. There are so many cool people there, so many innovators and veterans of the field as well, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's a great exchange of ideas, and yeah, it's very inspiring.
Cool, cool. So I'm gonna circle back to you to the values you were saying about the firm that you're in now, and I assume that that plays along with the stuff that you're interested in, right? So like you're there because because it's a good match. So what is it that they what is that set of values that is so appealing?
So first of all, I would say it's the um, excellence of like high quality work product and deep expertise.
Hmm.
So knowing what we're doing, and I love learning from my more senior colleagues.
Hmm.
Um, Also, we are very focused in this area, and we know our clients and we understand their needs. And finally, it's very humane
Cool.
in the sense that, well, we have a perhaps better work-life balance than some other larger
Oh, good.
firms.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but also we have so our leadership allows younger uh, employees like myself to go out there to
Yeah,
explore, to write, to present, and that is amazing. That's I really value that as well.
yeah, yeah. Case in point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's amazing, and I'm really
that's
lucky to
cool.
be here.
That's cool. So so it really is sort of the the perfect storm of those two things of finding sort of the right people and already being interested in communications tech,
Yes.
right? That's cool. I really appreciate that. So I want to dive into your AI interest too in a minute, but like no, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead because I'm not going to wait for that. So I have a lot of opinions about that. So I'm curious what you think, right? So to correct my understanding, um, the lawsuits that were sort of flying around on for copyright law were I have a lot of friends who are artists, right? And also the people who Z Factor, the people who help me produce this show. We've talked a lot about generative AI with and what they sort of feel about it. Um, the I've been always having a hard time grappling with the concept that it would be any more violative to train it on any sort of data as it would for you personally to learn how to draw by looking at a bunch of pictures, right?
That's a common point.
Right. And so and so I don't think that people understand that, right? And it's the same thing with ChatGPT, right? It's like, then when they were sort of freaking out that it's giving wrong answers about stuff, I feel like they're sort of missing the point of what it is. They never claimed it was a search engine, right?
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because it appears that Bing AI chat
Hmm.
is trying to combine the search engine and the generative
Right.
AI, that as we know it from other examples. So,
Right.
to your point, that it's similar to train AI, it's similar. It's a similar process to learn how to write or how to draw, and for the AI to be trained. Um,
Hmm.
I think there can be a counter argument to that,
Hmm.
because the scale at which AI can be trained automatically is much greater than what a person
Hmm.
can learn, and like it's much faster, and and the amount of material that AI can output is very different and much greater than what a person can produce in their lifetime.
Right. 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 That's true. I mean, it's still not that great at it. So
It can be very good. It can be very good
right. Right.
indeed. So it's a very interesting point, and I
Well,
definitely.
the
Mhm.
thing that I was wondering was whether or not they like I could see an argument for if and I had heard that this was possibly true that if they were going around paywalls, right,
Mhm.
to get at those copyrighted materials, that's an obvious violation, right? So if there are instances of that, then I can understand what the argument would be. But if it's just like it looked at stuff that I put on the internet and copied it, or like didn't copy it, it just was like, oh, that's how you draw something.
Yeah, this is a very good question, like whether that is a violation, because on the one hand, if some kind of reproduction or copying occurred in the machine learning process, it can fall under the copyright infringement
Hmm. Hmm.
umbrella. Um, but the question is whether there was copying, because um, it can be possible that the machine learning process only took into consideration the different patterns in those copyrighted works
Right,
and
right.
didn't really copy anything.
Right,
Uh,
you can't copy the shape of a muscle or like,
yeah. So they just learned the different values of different points in um, for example, a copyrighted picture, and the weight of different elements, etc. So that is probably the core question in this analysis.
Mhm.
And then, even if there's infringement, there may be there is a possibility that the fair use doctrine will apply, making it okay to infringe, so to say, in layman's terms.
Is that so how would that apply? So I would think fair use is also like making parodies of songs, right? That kind
Also,
of thing.
parodies are a great example of the fair use doctrine,
Mm.
because the fair use doctrine basically um, makes sure balances the interests of the public and the copyright holders
Mhm.
in cases of infringement, like where there would have been an infringement, um, and the interest of the public is not just a very general term. It has to do with the um, encouragement of education, of free speech, and
Mhm. Mhm.
criticism, news reporting. Um,
Right, 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 right.
so there are some
Right, because
limited,
otherwise you couldn't do anything, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I get you.
and
Yeah.
parodies are a great example of the free speech purpose of fair use. So, yeah, as long as the users of copyrighted material do not take too much advantage, so to say,
Right.
of the copyrighted material, it can be okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always understood copyright law as almost being more related to fraud than it is to like something like a patent, right? It's not necessarily so much intellectual property as it is like it's it's worse for me to copy something and then claim that I am the one who produced it than it is to just copy something, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think it may be a little bit broader than that,
Yeah.
because, and first of all, there are patents, there's copyright law, and there are trademarks, like as
Right.
some of the largest areas within IP law. And if we're talking about copyright, it protects um, the creative input that a person has
Hmm.
made into the the creative input that a person had in creating something expressive.
Hmm.
And copyright exists to promote the creation of expressive material and to
Right.
promote
Right.
this creative innovation, so to say, so that creators have some economic incentive to do so.
Right.
And
Right.
um, sometimes there may be copyright infringement even when a person doesn't claim that it's so I wouldn't say that the problem was that a person claimed authorship of something that they didn't create, but
Right.
they could use somebody else's work and incorporated it into their work in a way that
And
would be
not give due
infringing.
credit. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
or
Right.
compensate them.
Right. 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 Yeah. So d- d- obviously, and this has been around. This problem has been around for a while. But in terms of when it comes to the stuff that we deal with now with telecom and streaming video and digital rights management. Actually, that all started with music, right? No. um, and I was just talking on the last show about the history of Napster and how what people really didn't care about stealing music. What they really cared about was just having an easy way to get it.
Yeah.
And then once iTunes figured out a way to monetize it and give good digital rights management and compensate the artists, then everybody was like, no, it's fine. I will pay $1 for this.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a great example. And I
Yeah.
wonder if it will be possible to perhaps um, create a similar mechanism to compensate the different creators on whose
Oh,
works
and it totally could be
the
because it's
machines
like
were
I pay
trained.
for ChatGPT right now in the same way that I pay for Spotify, right? And they've already figured this out. This is not a new problem, right?
Yeah, and there've been it's been voiced in the industry as well. So this is a potential way to kind of balance the different needs of different people in the industry, so that because we do
Right,
need
right.
AI. It's a very useful technology, and we also have these artists who worked very hard and were very creative and innovative in creating their
Right.
works, on which the AI was trained. So I think there can be a balance here.
Yeah. And no, you're right. There totally can. And like we were saying, it's not the first time that this balance has had to be struck. So it's not a new problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because you've also seen the same evolution of that when it comes to broadcast television versus streaming, right? And the the broadcast TV industry sort of holding on for dear life to all of the content rights and all that stuff, right? Makes it kind of crappy for us as the end user to have to navigate all the weird deals that they've had to make in order to maintain that same sort of that same concept of making sure that people are getting compensated. Now, of course, now it's whether or not just giant corporations are getting compensated, but let's for sake of argument that there is an end artist that
One would hope.
it's like the content has been around long enough at this point that it's like, yes, it I guess it doesn't really matter what platform I watch Disney movies on. But all sorts of weird things have come up, right? So like I had heard, and this is hearsay for anybody, this is hearsay from a conversation I had on a previous episode. So I'm not saying this is true or not. But we were talking about how, just for example, Amazon Prime Video will, they say they're delivering you your video in the best, least interruptive way possible, but sometimes it's crappy, right? So sometimes it gets super pixelated. And I was like, I would rather it buffer and download as much as possible and give me a super high quality image than to try to give it to me crappily. And one of the things that we were talking about is that it is entirely plausible, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it sounds right, that it's part of the digital rights law that only a certain amount of it can be downloaded at one time, right?
Mm.
Because they don't want it to ever be actually you can't just be like, nope, this is mine now, right?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
unless there is some kind of a license agreement that allows you
Right.
to do that. Um,
Oh yeah, and then that license agreement is getting very strange with streaming too, because and not just video, right, but video games too, where if you are downloading it from a service, there have been instances where that actually not even just video games too, it's come with some digital books too, right? So that the owners revoke it, right?
mhm.
They'd be like, oh, you just don't have access to this anymore because we don't have access to it anymore, so you don't have the rights to it, right? So it's like, well, did I buy it?
Yeah, this can be tricky indeed. And there, the freedom of contract allows the parties to negotiate whatever license terms they prefer a lot of
Right.
times. So it's important to read those licenses. I know it's hard, they're long.
If only we had somebody whose job it was
Yeah.
to go.
No, I'm sometimes guilty of not reading all the terms, but
Yeah.
that's not
Well,
something I would
I can't
recommend.
imagine it's not realistically possible for a human mind to consume that much information sometimes.
And they change indeed. The terms change
Yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And of course, you're just like, yes, sure, it's fine. I just want to watch the movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you have? Is there any? It's in terms of sort of the stuff that you guys have to deal with. I mean, does that get really painful sometimes to have to sort of go through with a fine tooth comb some of these situations that where one small little detail is going to be make or break something.
Oh, it can be very exciting actually uh, to find those and bring them to the attention of the client and propose a different term and try and help the client negotiate it with the other party. So that is our bread and butter. So we
Yeah,
do that.
cool, cool. All right, so give me a safe example of something like that, because you say that you're focusing on startups kind
Mhm.
of, so like what are sort of some of the scenarios that you have to deal with
Mhm.
that you can talk about.
Yeah, well, for example, in funding rounds, um,
Hmm.
there are different ways you can negotiate. Um, that a very simple example would be whether the investor will have a board seat or not, or how many board seats. And I know that is not a very minutia kind of example because it's huge and it's kind of obvious, but those are some of the things that startups may want to consider.
Hmm.
Obviously, if they give the right, if they give the investor a board seat, they will have less control over their deals and operations. Um, and then the way that the investors will be compensated in the event of a sale, kind of puts different economic incentives in place for the holders of different kinds of stock,
Right,
and
right,
that's
right.
all important to take into consideration. Well, that is a funding round example. Other things would be liability allocation in
Hmm.
contracts. So you want to only be liable for something that you can control, ideally, um, and you wouldn't want to assume liability for something that you can't control, that the other party has
Right,
control over. Or
right.
another thing, The different uses that are allowed under a license agreement need to be negotiated very carefully, so that
Hmm.
you either as a copyright owner, or like the owner of the copyright to the software that you
Right, right, right.
license, so that you retain the ability to, for example, license it to somebody else, that you don't license more uses than you would like to. And as a licensee, you might want to make sure that you have the rights to use the copyrighted material whichever way you would like, and that you can foresee
Hmm.
needing. Um, so yeah, there are different details, and the copyright ownership in some resulting work, uh, in different service agreements is also important.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah.
and obviously, if we're talking about employment agreements, the company wants to have ownership of the IP produced by the employees, and we can go
Oh, right.
like long with the different
Oh
terms.
man, I didn't even consider that. So actually, that's a great, great segue to what I was going to ask you about next. Have you dove into the chaos that is open source world at all when it comes to this sort of thing?
Oh yeah, a little bit. It's very
Yeah.
exciting. So yeah, there are different open source licenses that have
Hmm.
different terms on how the open source material, like open source software, can be used. Whether it can be used for commercial purposes, whether you can incorporate into your own product, and whether you need to publish the resulting code uh, in
Hmm. Hmm.
repositories. Um,
Yeah.
those are very important things, and that is actually one of the claims in the GitHub Copilot um, copyright infringement case against GitHub, Microsoft, and some other defendants.
I don't think I've heard the whole details about this. What was
Ooh.
summarize for the audience here?
So, um, a class of software developers who contributed to the GitHub repositories, um,
Hmm.
open source software creators, sued GitHub, Microsoft, and some other defendants uh, for copyright infringement, like alleged copyright infringement, because um, the class of plaintiffs believes that the machine learning, the training of GitHub Copilot and another uh, code writing AI assistant that I
Hmm. Hmm.
forgot the name of, um, infringed on the different licenses under which the code on which they were trained
Right,
were published on GitHub, for
right,
example.
right,
And that was one of the
right.
claims, that they did not observe the terms of those licenses. And then another claim was that the defendants removed the copyright protection notices, um, and made it impossible to um, figure out whom to attribute if you use this code, or to even know what kind of license applies.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this kind of disrupts the chain of licenses.
Yeah. So does it with when it comes to AI and machine learning though, like you were saying, it's such a matter of scale. Does that start to vanish? Like does the concept start to vanish, you know? Like at some point it's like it's just looking at so much stuff. How do you attribute any one thing to any one other thing, you know?
That is a great question. I'm not sure I have the answer to it yet, but
No, no, that's the world we're in, right?
yeah.
It's all new.
But I'm very curious how the courts will look at it. I know that some of the
Yeah.
claims were already trimmed, um, but the main claims of copyright infringement remain in this case, and um, similar related cases filed by the same, with the assistance of the same law firm, but by authors, like book authors and digital artists.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, this is exciting,
That's
and I'm not sure how this will be decided yet.
yeah.
But I feel,
No, exactly
yeah,
right.
but I feel like um, it's it will be very important to explain how the technology works and how exactly machine
Yeah,
learning happened, because this can be done
right.
in different ways, right? um, and it will be case specific, and even if we have a decision against one type of AI, um, one exact kind of software, for example, it doesn't mean that the same reasoning, well, the same reasoning may apply, but it doesn't mean that the same
No, that's a
conclusion
super
will
good point.
apply.
That's a super good point because they all could theoretically we have a tendency to want to try to generalize, but they all theoretically could all be trained and built in totally different ways,
Right,
right?
right. And a very cool thing would be to understand the copyright law and maybe try and build a system that is compliant with it in
Mhm.
ways. So, however, it doesn't mean that the law will not evolve statutorily, for example, and the existing law may say one thing, and then another statute can be passed to kind of reflect the realities and change
Yep.
everything. So,
Because I'm always thinking of I'm not a big regulation guy, right? And I let me remind everyone that my opinions are my own and not those of my employer before I say what I'm about to say. I'm not a big regulation guy. I'm not a big government guy, right? And so I always try to imagine how things could and would manifest or be monetized or whatever without those protections there. And again, I always think of the Napster example, right? Which I find very funny now because back then it wasn't the smaller artists that were freaking out. It was sort of the bigger corporate labels that were freaking out, right? Whereas now we do have sort of everyone kind of raising their voices, being like, I feel like I'm being stolen from by this, right? Which is valid, right? It's valid. It's a valid concern. But I feel like it's easier to try to go with the flow of what's happening than it is to try to fight it most of the time, right? And so, again, sorry for keep using music examples,
oh,
but I
I
feel
love
like
it.
this has happened before, right? Uh, I think my favorite example was Radiohead, right? So as a consequence of everything that was happening with digital music downloading, they said, "Oh, you know what? Forget all this. We're going to put out our next album for free. Not for free, but pay what you feel, right? You can download it for nothing if you want, and here it is, and here's a very easy place to get it. You don't have to go through any of these weird systems. You don't have to do all that stuff." And they made more money personally than they ever did off of any other album they'd ever produced,
Wow. So, did they?
right?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. Did they produce it themselves without a label?
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they basically we're like, okay, we're just going to do this. Of course, it's hard because it's kind of a selection bias situation, right? Because they were already popular enough to pull this off, right?
Yeah, but
I think Nine Inch Nails did. Trent Reznor did the same thing shortly afterwards. But so here we come to the generative AI and the artists. It's like, is there a way for the artists to try to go with the flow of what's happening, right, rather than rely on the old copyright law, right?
yeah. Well, actually, there are. For example, I remember that Grimes posted that she. Well, this is not copyright. This is rights to publicity, because she allowed
Hmm.
her voice to be used in digital corporations, or like, sorry, she allowed the use of her voice in some music creation, but she placed a condition on it. She said, we split the profits 50-50.
There you go. That's what you got to do,
Yeah.
right? Get that prenuptial agreement.
So,
Well,
yeah.
so that just reminded me of an interesting fallout of all this that I've been thinking about with when it comes to AI is like, do you own images of yourself, right? So it's what you were saying about right to publicity, was that something that she manufactured in her contract, or is that kind of an established precedent, right to
Oh,
publicity?
it's a common law right, um, of a
Yep.
of an individual to using their likeness for economic gain, so to say.
Hmm.
It depends from states have different variations of this right, but for example, in some states, it can be more of a celebrity's right to use their likeness for economic gain.
Right.
In some states, it belongs to anybody. So, for example, it would be a violation to um, use, I don't know, AI generated video.
That's what I was going to ask, because so I just watched on the plane, because I just came back from
Mhm.
Thailand for the broadband forum,
That's exciting.
and yeah, it was a cool place. Yeah. I'd never been there before. It was very fun. Um, and as an aside, I do a lot of my work in internet standards, right? And so you see a lot of the same problems. We have very specific IPR policies at the Broadband Forum, and what you can do when you incorporate a standard, and what you have to do, and versus open source, and it's all very specific, right? um, so I empathize a little bit. It's this is stuff that I kind of have to deal with indirectly. Um, but so I was watching. Long story short, I was watching the new Indiana Jones movie on the plane, and in the beginning, it's Harrison Ford acting,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have to be forever in the future, right? Like or Carrie Fisher in the Star Wars movies in Rogue One, right? They made her at the end. It's a totally CGI version of her,
Hmm.
right? But it got me thinking during Indiana Jones. It's like they have a very perfectly generated younger version of Harrison Ford there acting. Does he own that likeness? Like, is it his? Right? When he's gone, is it still his? Ah!
So yes, that is a very very cool point that you made, because this reminds me of the negotiated terms of the. Um, I'm not sure how exactly it's called, but it's the Actors Guild. Um,
Yep, yep. Screen Actors Guild.
yes,
Yep,
so
yep.
I believe they negotiated the terms of their
Ah,
agreements to regulate the use of synthetic actors, and
hmm
yeah, so different kinds of AI assisted acting or AI generated acting, and um, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't exactly remember the terms now, but I believe that um, the use without an actor's consent was not okay.
right, right,
So
right, right.
yeah,
What if they're dead? Like, is it owned by the estate? Like,
yeah, it
I
can be
guess
tricky.
I ask these questions, but I know your answer is probably going to be, well, as whatever they made explicit in the contract is what is the case, right?
Yeah, this depends indeed. But yeah, as for the rights to publicity, so far it needs consent. So if you want to
Right,
use somebody's face, somebody's voice, or something very recognizable about them,
right.
um, so
You heard that here first, people. If you try to replicate my face, I,
now you know.
now you know. No matter how much I look like Jeremy Renner. uh, I've been thinking about this a lot though, because even I have the tools now. Very simply, it's like I don't need giant computers to do this. I have the tools now. There's one of the pieces of software I use is called Descript, um, and it's a transcript software, but it also can take samples of your
Hmm.
voice and add words where you didn't say them in your voice. And I was like, well,
Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
potential with this technology.
It's like my, I just, the way that I decide to move forward after all of this is like, if you already didn't trust what you see on the internet, now you really can't.
Yeah, we got to be critical in what we consume.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because this reminds me of AI and robocalls. So our firm works. we help voice service providers to be compliant with different standards
Okay.
like stir shaken and mitigate robocalls. And
Hmm.
robocalls are one area where AI can be a savior and the exacerbator of the problem, like the different use cases by different actors.
Right. Right.
Because on the one hand,
Right.
you can, like, bad actors can use it to make robocalls on a larger scale and yeah, make it harder for everybody. On the other hand, it can be used to potentially detect robocalls and through different patterns and prevent them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. We actually just at the broadband forum, we had our town hall session was on cybersecurity stuff in general, and one of the presentations was about that, how it's basically an arms race now, right? So it's like you have hackers that can use AI, and then you have uh, defenders that can use AI, and then you have AI that can recognize AI, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, have you dove into any of any specific sort of telecom situations yet since your time there, or you said you were just still kind of learning the ropes about that?
Oh, so yes, I've been involved with a lot of different sub areas of telecom law, but
Hmm.
um, yes, I focused my practice in robocall mitigation, um,
Cool.
a little bit of radio frequency compliance law,
Hmm.
and
Oh, cool.
different transactional matters, a little bit of litigation, uh, assisting um, telecom companies in obtaining rights of way to put their infrastructure.
Cool.
So yeah, we do
Cool.
a lot of different sub areas of telecom law. So
Are you running into a lot of the getting them to sort of navigate the giant
oh yes,
the giant fund pools of funding like BEAD and all those
the
things?
Universal Service Fund, for example.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we do that. We do telecom tax compliance. So
Cool.
everything, almost. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, I also work a lot with
And
tech startups,
cool. What kind of tech
all
startups?
kinds. Well, we target telecom companies or
Right,
including
right, right.
telecom
So
software.
I was trying to imagine an example of a startup that is also a telecom software,
Oh,
you know,
well, um, for
without naming names,
yeah. So,
obviously,
for example,
but
some companies offer AI-assisted customer churn detection. So
cool.
that is a cool use case for AI. Mm, and yeah, other kinds of telecom software providers.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I wonder if they are behind the scenes using some of the technologies I work on because we work on device
Hmm.
management protocols, right? And a lot of it is reading telemetry data from broadband gateways, right? And when you have that as a massive scale, interestingly enough, the next town hall series we're going to do at the broadband forum is about AI,
Very
uh,
cool.
because the telcos now have an opportunity to, now that they have all this mass telemetry, right? They can do stuff about it. Some of it has to do with sustainability and sort of managing power consumption and turning things on and off on a
Hmm.
mass scale when
That's
they don't
awesome.
have to. And the EU is really big
Hmm.
on that. Um, and then other some of it is exactly what you said. It's like kind of preemptive service, preemptive it's preemptive service actions, right? So it's like the end user is using it. They're using AI to do to troubleshoot things before the end user even reports that there's a
Hmm.
problem,
Yeah,
right?
and on a large scale, AI can be used for spectrum management and distribution. Like you said, seeing how the resources are being used and kind of redistributing or like shutting something down if it's not being used.
Hmm.
Um, So yeah, and obviously customer relations management, personalization of the customer's experience, and contextual engagement. Uh, a lot of use
Cool.
cases, and it's really awesome.
Yeah, yeah. That's fun. That's fun that you get to work with those guys because that's the opportunities. There's going to be so many of
Yeah.
them.
And it's some of the legal concerns are the same no matter the
Hmm.
technology. So especially in the transactional field, when we work with different contracts and licenses, but it's uh, it's interesting. So we can kind of utilize our experience in different fields.
Do you, do you guys end up having to deal with any if we're talking about telecoms, you're going to have to deal with any privacy
Absolutely,
law kind of
yes.
stuff, like the end user, like what data you can use to use for these
Right,
purposes.
right. We have had such inquiries, and we also advise clients on customer um, personal data protection and the different good practices that they can employ to protect
Cool, cool.
CPNI. And yeah, privacy is a huge field in telecom, and we have an awesome uh, attorney who specializes in it, and I've been working with her, uh, Linda McReynolds, and yeah, this is important too.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then the flip side of that, of complying with lawful intercept requirements, which, however anybody feels about that,
Yeah, that's
they have to do
yes,
it.
yes, it can be required
Yeah,
yeah, in some situations.
yeah, crazy. Cool. Well, this has been very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate it.
No, it's great. I'd love to chat more about this like endlessly because this is an all-consuming topic that continues to change,
Yeah, yeah, and
as we learn
oh
new stuff.
yes, and especially with telecom, it's very hard to navigate without having the experience in the field. So you got to go to the
Right.
experts. It's
Exactly.
changing all the
Exactly.
time.
Right. And I've been, and not to go off on a totally different tangent near the end of the show, but we've talked about this a bunch of times recently about how telcos, when it comes to residential broadband service specifically, are dealing with something that was a consumer product first, right? And so it's coming from the lens of the consumers having all the power about this. And now the telcos are like kind of smashing into it like this. So it's all sorts of weird legal questions like who owns the network? Who owns the broadband gateway? Right? Like where's the hedge? I don't know.
Yeah,
And then all of the privacy implications and it's crazy.
it's exciting.
Yeah. So you're going to have plenty of work ahead of you, I guess is the point.
I hope so. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Cool. All right, Diana. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I'm going to get this out for those listening. This is happening before the end of 2023, but you're going to hear it in the
Woo!
new year. So
Happy New Year.
happy New Year.
Well, thank you so much, Jason.
All
This has been
right.
a lot of fun.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad. And as always, I do say, please subscribe if you haven't already. If you made it to the end of this show, please subscribe on YouTube. Go subscribe on your podcast channels because that gets it to you automatically, and it also shows me that this is working and it's worth
Woo!
doing. So,
And connect on LinkedIn.
yes, definitely connect on LinkedIn. It makes everything easier. LinkedIn is, by the way, a way better social media platform than almost any of the other ones. But, and above all, own the nerdy things you love and have fun doing them.
Yay.
Thanks, Diana.